Welcome back, Rabbi Dr. Eliezerbrodt. We're going back to our old, I say old, it's been a while since we've done an episode on Harav Agad and Chaim Kanievsky. We're already approaching the second yahrzeit. So what better time to continue talking about some of the Seforim and interesting ways that Reb Chaim Kanievsky was Mechadish and wrote his Seforim. We are thankful again to our season 2 episode sponsor, who's anonymous, and it is in memory of Reb Moshe Chaim ben Reb Yitzchak David. How are you, Rabbi Brot? Take us back. Where were we up to, and where are we headed?
Okay, so basically, in season 2, we jumped into a rabbit hole that took us for a very much longer than I intended through the world of manuscripts, Rishonim, Gaonim, even manuscripts of Gemara, and the reason was we showed how Reb Chaim Kanievsky throughout his works is unbelievably updated in using all these materials. Not only was he a tremendous baki in the standard Bavli, Yerushalmi, Tosefta, Midrashi Halacha, he somehow had all the new Rishonim that was available for him, Ga'inim, and he's using it everywhere. So I decided to go and discuss, does everyone do that? Is it a Chiddush? And so we called it the Mishnah Brura method, and Reb Chaim Kanievsky on that side, whereas the Welt says over who's the other side, the Chazon Ish. So we try to map that. We try to map out the story through a course of approximately 5 episodes, and then we try to decipher the deep Shitas HaChazon Ish and the Sugya, very, very complex, because in so many different places he says different things, and we try to make heads or tails out of it, and we concluded at the time promising that we're getting out of the rabbit hole, and we're going to try to come up possibly in the next episode with a Mahalach. So now we will, in Mir Hashem, through the course of what I'm setting up today and the next episode, try to have some possible Mahalach, but we're really going back to Reb Chaim Kanievsky much more in depth, which is what? We've been talking about the Derech Emunah. And the Derech Emunah, as is very well known, is his most he's called maybe even on the, we have pointed out on the his Matzeva says Baal Derech Emunah. There's something about it, and that the Chibur Derech Emunah probably will be his. I'm not going to say it, but I guess so. I will say it for lack of better words. What he's going to go down is the Baal. He's already called by some places the Baal Derech Emunah. Point being that going into some aspects of Baal Derech Emunah in the Chibur Derech Emunah that we have yet to discuss, we will be able to get back to our Chazon Ish for very briefly. But the point is more about Derech Emunah and more about Reb Chaim Kanievsky, and that is as follows. Reb Chaim Kanievsky, we discussed at great length, mostly in season 1, towards the last few episodes, set out to write this work on Zram. We discussed Barichos, what was out there on Zram beforehand, and Vas Epis, Reb Chaim Kanievsky decided Zram to go work on Zram. So we said he, Baruch Hashem, wrote a nice Hagdama, more than 2 pages, and he lists out everything that was happening, the matzav and everything, and then until the conclusion was the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish is Yadua, comes to Eretz Yisrael. Hilchas Ra'am was not so negay in Eretz Yisrael, but by the time the Chazon Ish gets there's much more Yidden there. It's much more relevant. That's why Shulchan Aruch is very bekitzer about it, and many Paiskim don't talk about it. Chazon Ish is legendary for being in the areas of Zram, bring it down halacha l'maisa, but it's very complex. It's not user friendly. Chaim Kanievsky wanted to take that and make it user friendly, and also there's a very important dagesh. Tons of new materials that had just come to light in the years from when the Chazon Ish did it till Reb Chaim Kanievsky starts doing it, and he lists it all out, and we documented this clearly in the first season of Reb Chaim Kanievsky, the last few episodes. So he was taking the Chazon Ish, bringing it down halacha l'maisa, making it more user friendly, at the same time using all different Rishonim and discoveries that were being discovered in the next bunch of years from the Chazon Ish's Petira, pretty much until he sets out to do it. Fine. What does he call himself? He's madgish this again and again. Towards the end of the Agdama, Ein matras hasefer ela likut mar mekayim shalachos b'makam echad kedei shaloimed yochel lachzar b'ktsara al tamtzis halachos. He's making a likut sefer on Zram. That what you need? It should be kal that someone wants to chazer the halachos. Because mean to say this, if in 1900 someone would sit down and want to chazer Hilchos Ram, it would be pretty easy. Again, maybe the sugi could be hard, but whatever. all of a sudden, by the time you finish the Chazon Ish and all these new discoveries, it comes into, and everyone knows we have a 4 or 5 volume set of Derech Emunah, a massive amount of material. So he was trying to make it that someone could learn. Now, he, of course, and we said we're going to get to discussing this, I'm not dealing with halacha l'maisa, says Reb Chaim Kanievsky, and he spells that out in the Hagdama, at the end of the Hagdama, the Shar of the Sefer, he's madgish that. But the point is, you have all the material, an encyclopedic Likut Sefer. In the Hagdama, in the Shar of the Sefer, Reb Chaim Kanievsky is describing himself. What is he doing? Calling it Derech Emunah. Called Divrei HaRambam Melukut Mesifrei Rabbi Seina Mefarshim. Then I bring down all the Rishayim and the Achrayim and the Chazon Ish, so that what? Laman Yaretz Kol Kairabay V'Yochel Kol Echel Lachzor Kol Chazram Bizman Katzer. Obviously, it's his man Katzer and our man Katzer might be two different things, but the point is, he's making a Likut Sefer. Now, when you think about that, what's really ultimately happening when you're looking this over here is Reb Chaim Kanievsky is making a classic Likut on Hilchos Zrah. That's what he says. We said numerous times in season 2 and in season 1 that one of the people that most likely had a tremendous impact on him was the Chafetz Chaim, the Mishnah Berurah, Baal Mishnah Berurah. What is the Mishnah Berurah? Just to go back for a moment, what is one of the main points in the Mishnah Berurah? The Mishnah Berurah says like this: Avada, it's very important to halacha l'maisa. But what's one of the things that got the Mishnah Berurah to write his Mishnah Berurah? Was there any halachic works before the Mishnah Berurah? So the Mishnah Berurah says, he in his Hagdama to Mishnah Berurah, he points out a certain Nakuda. He points out various valuable Nakudas, some we've mentioned. And one of the Nakudas is he says that the Ber Hativ was Malake Psakim of the Turizav, the Taz, and the Magen Avraham, and other Mefarshim. Okay. But then, as time goes on, there were more Chashav Svarim that came out, such as, in the Mishnah Berurah lists a bunch, El Yerabah, Mata Yehuda, and more he lists out. Fine. Then he says, came out the Pri Megadim. Anyone knows you learn Mishnah Berurah, how many times is it called the Pri Megadim? In Kitzur, the more and more materials kept on coming out. And in order to go find it, what do you have to do? Someone has to be muchrach lechapes bekama v'kama me'achroinim in order to get a halacha l'maisa, because basically there's different points in time. Someone goes ahead and makes an encyclopedic Likut of stuff, and then there's more Chashav Svarim, and they're not incorporated in it. So the Chafetz Chaim felt, he says, there's the Shari Tshuva, very important sefer, does an incredible job, which we're going to discuss shortly, of materials and Tshuvas and Svarim that the previous Tkuva didn't have, but already from the Pri Megadim and onwards, he doesn't have it. So says the Chafetz Chaim, went ahead and sat and collected information from Rabbi Akiva Eiger, the Nesivos, the Magen Gibayrim, the Artez Chaim, and many more Svarim. Okay. Now, one other thing that the Chafetz Chaim says I'm being malakit is he's not just being malakit. He's not just going, okay, I'm going to collect 10, there's 43 new Marmakayim Svarim out there. I'm going to put them in here. The Chafetz Chaim, what he does is, and that's what makes him so special, is he starts through scratch. He learns through the Rishayim. He tracks, and as we enumerated already in season 2, he also did what Reb Chaim Kanievsky does on Zram. He went and tracked down the numerous Rishayim that were coming out in his time and using them and starting from the Gemaras and going through the Sugyas Be'in Admai with the new discoveries. So Reb Chaim Kanievsky is doing that. Reb Chaim Kanievsky is doing exactly that, which is he's doing the Tamtzis halacha from all the material that exists out of Chazon Ish and even after the Chazon Ish, plus the new Rishayim, and then on the same side he goes through Be'iyun, which is what Chafetz Chaim has called his Bir Halacha. Says Reb Chaim Kanievsky, I have something also called Bir Halacha. Okay, this is all Dvarim Pshutim that we've mentioned a little bit in the past, and now we're being malishit. So, but the point is that both the Mishnah Berurah and the Derech Emunah, as they say themselves, they're Likut Svarim. So obviously the question is, what does that mean? They're Likut Svarim, and this is the question that I would like to discuss a little bit today, and that is the origin of Likut Svarim throughout the generations. And what does that even mean? Obviously, we're going to see today that there are different types of Likut Svarim. Someone's not going to, most people, you might hear or might have heard from different people being mezalzel, it's a Likut Sefer, what does he do? He's not doing anything. No one's really, most people will not be mezalzel in the Mishnah Berurah and say that. So obviously there's some type of chiluk, and that's what we hope to discuss to bring out what it is more behind what Reb Chaim Kanievsky / Mishnah Berurah and others were trying to do. And that is as follows. We begin with the Beis Yosef. We're going to go a little bit backwards after the Beis Yosef, and then we're going to go forward. I am not attempting to go through every aspect of this topic. This would take us a lot more than 8 episodes, which we are not doing now. Anyway, the Beis Yosef, Wazaicha in his Agdama enumerates a whole bunch of different Nakudis about what he's trying to do. And basically, one of the Nakudis he brings out is that there's tons of information and someone's got to be Mesaderit. There's tons of Rishainim that became available by the time he's, let's say, he's mamish in the beginning of the Achrayim. At that point in time, there's tons of material. And in order for someone to go through it all on every single sugya, it's almost impossible. So he's going to do you a favor and he's going to be Mesaderit neatly. Then he says, but what? So someone might say, what do you need me for? So he says, I'll rely on Sefer Kitzurim. Which ones does he refer to? Says the Beis Yosef, such as the Smak, the Agur, the Kolbai. He says, no, it's not useful. And he says there's problems with all these Svarim. You have to be careful, which even on those Svarim, we're talking about Rishainim, it's problematic always. And you have to, say there's a Geder in Likut Svarim or Kitzer Svarim, sometimes it's too much Mekatzer. So the Beis Yosef, I'm going to take a lot of information, and anyone who learns Beis Yosef sees that a lot of times you're faced with a lot of information, a lot of quotes of Rishonim. He had a beautiful library for that period of time, and he publishes it. He starts from the Gemara, Rambam, and many Rishonim, and basically, which we'll see more about later on, he becomes sort of a library. In addition, for multiple purposes, the Beis Yosef, for many Achrayim, that was the library. They didn't have Rishonim. They didn't have a lot of Svarim. The Beis Yosef was Zeicha to have a unique library, and this becomes a library for many people. So forget about the Nakuda of the Beis Yosef becoming the Paisa for Klal Yisrael. He also becomes the library for Klal Yisrael. So his Likut was much more advanced because it's not as a kitzer as other, even Rishonim, which he's calling out specifically by name some of them, and that's what he intended to do. Now, obviously, there's much, much more happening in the Beis Yosef. We are not going through the Beis Yosef right now. That's its own story. But the point is, one of the many Nukudas in the Chibur Beis Yosef was he looked at himself as a Likut Sefer. Now, his Likut Sefer we see is he's not just saying V'chein kasav ha'pri megadim blah blah blah. He brings you many times complete quotes of the Gemara, the Rishonim, and sometimes when people learn it, they're like, okay, what's he bringing me down? These such long quotes, is it necessary? And then obviously when you learn a Be'iyun, sometimes you could see that it's very important to even see how he brings it down, and that's its own story. Okay, so that's a key Likut Sefer that makes a mapecha in Klal Yisrael on that Nakuda alone. He's taking a ton of information and making it that a person doesn't have to go technically to libraries all over and go buy himself 50,000 Rishayim and even Chuvas Var. The Beis Yosef helps you out. Fine. Fast forward a bunch of years later, and about 1650, a Yid, Reb Yitzchak Yeshurun, prints a Sefer Panim Chadashos, and what his point is, he realizes it's already a long time after the Beis Yosef, and there's new materials that are not available. Okay, but he does most people didn't even hear of the Sefer, and we're not going to go into all the details of the Sefer. Comes along around that same time, there was a Yid, and this Yid was very, very famous. He's the Knesses Hagdoila from Reb Chaim ben Abetz. Oh man, am I botching up? So I'm not even going to attempt it right now to say his full name. I had it right before, but I guess not right now. Okay, anyway, so the Baal Knesses Hagdoila, born in 1603 and dies in 1673. He's a Talmud of the Marit, and his Sefer, as the Chida writes, and as you know, I'm very fond of quoting the Chida, says, without the Sefer, Lo Yarim Ish Meira Hira Habaki B'Darke Hira V'Meira Hira Es Yadim B'Shum Hira Ad Sheyelech Mehira Leveis HaKnesses V'Yira Ma B'Fanav U'Ma Yira Rumoizen Einei Chachmasoi. B'Kitzer, the Knesses Hagdoila puts out this, also again a Likut Sefer, amassing a ton of material, and it's on all Dalech Elke Shulchan Aruch, and we're not going to go mapping out all the different aspects again about the Knesset Hagdoila, but what's important for us over here for our story is, in his Akdama, he says like this: there was the Beis Yosef. The Beis Yosef did an incredible job. He gathered tons of information, but from the time of the Beis Yosef till 1650, now we're talking about a period of less than 100 years. 16, let's say, when does he publish it? He's working on the 1630s. So we're talking about less than 100 years. There are hundreds of Chuvas Svarim from great Gedolim that are not available, that are not in the Beis Yosef. And again, you're back to the same problem. There's great Gedolim's material in Chuvas Svarim you have to go to a library to track down. So I'm going to do you the favor, and I'm going to make it easy for you. Then he says, not only that, I happen to have some manuscripts, I have other materials, and there's a lot to discuss about what was in the library of the Knesset Gedolah, what what wasn't in the library, the Knesset Gdoila. It was more a Sephardi library, a literature of Sephardic Seforim, less Ashkenazic Seforim. At a certain point in time, he also gets Ashkenazic Seforim. What I mean, Ashkenazic Seforim, even Chuvas Ramah, Chuvas Maram, Masas Binyamin, and others, he only got to him later on, but this is a different story now for now. But the point is that at the age of, in his 20s, he begins his massive project of collecting the Achronim. And this becomes, again, a go-to sefer for one who's trying to learn halacha. That there's a ton of information, and someone needs to take it and put it in a way that it should be usable, that people don't have to do massive amounts of research. Okay, so this is the story with the Knesset Gdoila. And as I said, the Chida, who ends up doing something about this himself, also is saying that the Knesset Gdoila is mamish, an important stop in this whole story of what happens. Okay, so now obviously the question is like this. Let's say someone paskins from a Likut Sefer, even from the Beis Yosef, or from the Knesset Gdoila. It means that the Knesset Gdoila brings you down a tshuva that says this and this. What do? Is that good enough? Or forget about the Knesset Gdoila. The Beis Yosef brings down. You're learning the Beis Yosef. The Beis Yosef brings down. This is what it says in the Rashba. Could I paskin like that, or not? Anyway, this is a conversation, which again also is obviously a very, very long conversation. I'm not going to go through all the pratim. I'm just going to say one key maramakim that from there's dozens of aspects to go through, and that is like this. There's already a chuvas rimigash. Because basically you have to understand, every point in time, there was always a ton of information. Someone comes ahead and gathers it together, such as the Torah. What was the Torah doing? Up till the Torah's point, there was a lot of information. He was making it user-friendly. After the Torah, the next person does, and the next person does. That's what a lot of Chashavah Svarim, the times of Rishonim, were doing, is they were taking the materials up till now. Avada, a lot of them mention and say plenty of their own stuff in the course of their sefer, but part of it is to take material and make it all organized, that you have a one-stop place, so to speak, to look at the material. So the Rimagash, way earlier, we're talking about before the Rambam, the Rebbe, the father of the Rambam. So he was asked such a question, which is like this. What happens if a person, he doesn't know the sugyas? What does he know? He knows the true. Let's say he knows the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch of that day, in the Rimagash's time. If there was a Kitzur Shulchan Aruch type sefer, and he wants to paskin, but he doesn't know the Gemara, he doesn't know the sugyas. It could be he doesn't even know where the Gemaras are, and he wants to paskin. Or you have a guy who's a very learned person, but that he's mamish a lamdin, so to speak. But this lamdin does not have achra halacha. Say he didn't learn where how to paskin, so to speak. With Kitzur, the Rimagash has this tshuva. He says like this: a lot of people, and in this phenomena that he's talking about hundreds and hundreds of years ago, obviously is a problem that resurfaced dozens of times throughout history. There are people that they paskin and they don't know anything about. They don't have havanas hapsak halacha, which requires tremendous iyun from the Talmud, and it's better that they should rely on a Kitzur Shulchan Aruch type sefer, which is written by a chashuva person, and that's it. It's Misha Meir Mitzvus Again v'Samech Aleim Afal Pisheni Yochel Havam b'Talmud Hu Yoiser Hagen u'Meshubach Me'Oiseh Shechashuv Shu Yodei b'Talmud v'Samech Al Atzmai. Means say the guy that thinks, I know how to learn Gemara, so that means I know how to be a Paisik. That's not who you should rely on. You have to rely. It's better to say there's only two choices in this case the Rimagash is talking about. Obviously, if you have a third choice, a person that knows how to learn and knows how to be machriya and halacha, the Rimagash is not saying that it all stops from, they have to only pass like the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch of that period of time, so to speak. But the point that the Rimagash is making is that there is an akuda of relying on a Likut Sefer, even if you don't understand what this Likut Sefer says, but there's a certain nakuda over here, and this comes up time and time again throughout history. So what the point over here is like this: if let's say you have a person, he could read text, he could read the Beis Yosef, he doesn't know what to do, and he opens up his Beis Yosef. He's living out in some village. There's no rav to ask a shayla. There was no telephones. There's no nothing. He opens up the thing, and it says straight up, the Beis Yosef brings down a Rashba, and he wants to rely on it. That's the way to go. Better then he should start thinking, I learned the Gemara, so now I have a whole deal. Can obstacle tire? No. Says Rimagash, no. That's a dangerous person. Okay. Obviously, a person that has smicha who learned through the sugyas properly, the Rimagash is not referring to. Anyway, this becomes time and time again a taina in Paiskim from the Rishonim through the Achronim. Just to mention one marmakim. The Marsha in Saita says that many people paskin from Shulchan Aruch, ve'ena yoidim tameinin shel kol davar, if they don't know the Talmud. So basically, you have to have proper shimush, and their psak could be faulty. Mean to say, the Marsha says that he goes different than the Rimigash. That basically what happens like this: the Avla could come out, and someone could say, "Oh, I don't need rabbis. I don't need paiskim. I have my Kitzur Shulchan Aruch of the day, whichever period of time you're living, and I have that. Let's say we'll go with the kolboy. I'm going to use the kolboy. I don't need rabbis." Says or when the Marsha is talking about already, this is when the Shulchan Aruch from Rabbi Yosef Kairu is out there. I don't need to look at the Magen Avraham. I don't need to look at the Taz. I don't need to look at anyone. I read the text. I could pass. I don't need to go to a rabbi. That's the danger. That even though, so the Riba Gash is saying, if I have a choice, where I'm trying to say is there is a very big difference between the cases of the Riba Gash and the Marsha. But the point is, someone just to rely on without knowing the sugyas, and all of a sudden taking a Likut Sefer, let's say, without knowing the sugyas and start being mechalik and making tyrus, that's a terrible apple. Anyway, this became a hot topic throughout the generations, time and time again, and mapping it out is not for now. It's a different time. But the point is that we have that there's Likut Svarim. There is an important aspect to them, and such as with the Beis Yosef and such as with the Knesset Gdolah. But there's also a fear that you have to be careful who's using the Likut Svarim. Sometimes that could also get in the way. That could also cause problems. Okay, so now I said after the Knesset Gdolah, there are other Likutim Svarim, and we're not going to go into the whole history, but we're going to just stop at two more stops in the history of Likut Svarim, and that is when one opens up their Shulchan Aruch Arachayim. Let's say you're learning Mishnah Berurah. You see on the side is Ber Hetiv, who's one such Likut Sefer, who's actually two Likut Svarim. There are two Ber Hetivs that were somehow combined together. That's its own story. We're not going to discuss that, what the Ber Hetiv is trying to do. But there's one in Shulchan Aruch Arachayim known as the Shari Tshuva. Who is the Shari Tshuva? So it's known as to be the author is Reb Chaim Mordechai Margolis, the brother of Reb Ephraim Zal Margolis. Now, without getting into the whole discussion of the authorship of the Shari Tshuva, because a large percentage of the Sefer was actually written by Ephraim Zalman Margolis, who, as we've mentioned numerous times, is Mod Chaviv Alai. Anyway, the point is that the brothers worked on it at one point, and Reb Chaim Margolis dies at a certain point in time, so a large percentage is completely done by Ephraim Zalman Margolis. This is a fact that's not so well known. But that's not important for us today. But the point is like this. What is the Shari Tshuva? So anyone opens up your Shari Tshuva, when you learn Shulchan Aruch, Arachayim, especially you're learning Mishnah Berurah, you see it's very helpful. What is it? So basically very simple. Again, the same idea what the Mishnah Berurah did, just this happened much before the Mishnah Berurah. There's a ton of literature, similar to Knesset Gdolah says. From less than 100 years from after the Beis Yosef died, there was tons of Gedolei Olam. They wrote Tshuvas Svarim. How is someone going to access it? How are you going to know if what the next generation is saying in Torah? So says the Knesset Gdolah, he happened to have had a major library, and he gathers tons of information. Fast forward a bunch of years later, early 1800s, Rabbi Ephraim Zal Margolis has this massive Svarim library, of also including of that. He has rare Tshuva Svarim for people in Galicia, in Eastern Europe, do not have mostly Svarim. There's a ton of information. Says Rabbi Ephraim Zal Margolis, he wishes that someone would come along and put it together into a handy Likut similar to the Knesset Gdolah type of idea. His brother decides to do it. Rabbi Ephraim Zalman gave him a lot of the Svarim because there weren't two copies of these materials floating around. They were very rare, from approximately a few hundred Svarim, mostly Tshuva Svarim. And one reads the Shari Tshuva, you could see tons of Tshuva Svarim that today, you have Hebrew books, you have Eitzah Chachma, but for years and years they were not available. And people would handle different shilas. They would say, the Shari Tshuva brings down a shaila from this and this achron, and I hold like this. And that was the starting point of many conversations in Tshuva Svarim and in Halacha Svarim, including the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah was makbid to publish the Mishnah Berurah and leave the Shari Tshuva on the page, so that he didn't have to chop out and have to discuss even more stuff, because the Shari Tshuva had a very important amount of information. I'm just going to throw out one yediyah. This is a Chiddush Nifla, which could has its own story behind it. But how does the Chidah make it to the Ashkenazi world, so to speak? The answer is through the Shari Tshuva. What in the world am I talking about? Very simple. The Shari Tshuva is published after it's published in the 1820s. It's published from then on always. In Shulchan Aruch that Archaim. If you learn through Shari Tshuva, you'll see one of the main Marmakaimis, the Birkei Yosef, had just come out. The Machzik Bracha had just come out. This is a Sfardi Gadol, including a lot of the other Tshuva Sfarim that he brings are Sfardi Gadolim. The Ashkenazi world, the Beis Yosef didn't get to this far part of the world, even though he traveled and he was very famous even in his lifetime. But what happens is, once it's on the page, Ephraim Zalman Golos is bringing it down. Keseder, this is a chiddush that if you check into it, you'll see that it's beyond true. But the person who was Ayman on this was the Maggid of Vilna, Rabbi Cheskel Feivel's son, who took him over, Rabbi Zev mi Vilna. He was the extremely chashuv Again, who was the Maggid of Vilna for many years, and he writes this in Askama somewhere. He points this out. But basically, Rabbi Ephraim Zalman Golos and his brother, by the fact that they incorporated so many psakim of the Beis Yosef, they made what today in the Ashkenazi world, so to speak, one of the most chashuva known names of Sfardi Gedolim is the Chida, for many reasons, but this is one of the nakudas behind it. Anyway, but the point is that the Shari Tshuva was being makatzer tons of information that he had from his vast library. Okay. So Rabbi Ephraim Zalman, in a beautiful Hagdama, Barichos, explains this. He also enumerates how there were other different Likutim Sfarim from the times of the Rishayim, moving onwards. And Keseder, this was a thing that kept on happening. And this is what even the Ramah was doing on the Beis Yosef. There was information that the Beis Yosef didn't have, right? Anyway, Bekitzer, at one point he says, interesting lashon over here, who has all these Sfarim? Who has the kayach mi yachal yois chayfish b'chadreim hanim tzekazeh? Who's going to be able to search? You have to. It's a avodah to search through hundreds of Tshuvas Sfarim. The Kitzer, he always wanted to do it, and his brother starts the project. Then he says one other interesting thing that has major ramifications, just to throw it out there. Kasa paiskim she yoiser yesh lismoich al tshuvais me'ala paiskim me'acher shemeshiv halacha lemaisa harba medaktikim ba yoiser mimasha kaisav la'atzam piskei dinim she'efsher shloinem and rak la'alacha v'loy lemaisa. This is a very big discussion, which is as follows. The Shari Tshuva, and also the Knesset Agdola earlier, they are being malakate from Tshuva Sfarim. Tshuva Sfarim in general was, a Rav was asked a Shaila, and the Rav said, Halacha Lamaisa, in this case, you should paskin like this. So there is a huge discussion, Bechlal, in Klali Hayra, Klali HaPaiskim, that is that when you have a Rav that wrote a Tshuva Sefer and a Halacha Sefer. Lo Yitzor, the Mishnah Berurah, had written a Tshuva Sefer, and there'll be a stira between his Tshuva Sefer and his Halacha Sefer. What do you do? And this is negayah by certain Sfarim and certain Gedolim. So the answer is, Rabbi Ephraim Zalman says, Tshuvas, he takes the side that Tshuvas are more important. So he's obviously justifying the case of the Shari Tshuva. Okay, one last stop is the Pischei Tshuva. The Pischei Tshuva, when one learns Yeridea, but Evan Ezer, you find incredible sefer from, again, what was he doing? He was going al pi the derech of the Knesset Agdola, al pi the derech of Rabbi Ephraim Zalman Golos, as he says in his Akdamas, and he collected from a few hundred Sfarim. This was enumerated. There's a doctorate written a few years ago from a fellow of Yitzchaki in Bar Ilan University about the Pischei Tshuva. He shows what the exact library of the Pischei Tshuva was, and he collects hundreds of Tshuva Sfarim, and he brings it onto the page. Now, so similar to what the Shari Tshuva does, that he's bringing tons of Tshuva Sfarim, he does the same thing. So here, we're going to go for just 1 or 2 minutes to explain a drop about the Pischei Tshuva, and that is as follows. What is the approach? How does one look at the Pischei Tshuva? So if anyone familiar, when you learn Shulchan Aruch, you see the Pischei Tshuva brings down a bunch of Tshuva Sfarim. But like this. Reb Shlomo Yosef Zevin, who, yes, I'm very fond of quoting, he has the following, he says the following Nakuda. Could be some people might disagree with it, but I think Reb Zevin is definitely entitled to his opinion, and that is as follows. After the Pischei Tshuva, many years later, came out another Chashuva Sefer in Yeridea, which is also a collection of tons of Tshuva Sfarim that's known as the Darkei Tshuva from the Munkacher. What's the difference between the Pischei Tshuva and the Darkei Tshuva? Says Reb Zevin, Bekitzer Nimratz, he says, the Pischei Tshuva, it does not say, oh, Ayin Sham, Ayin Sham, Ayin Sham, this guy's matir, this guy says it's asur, this is machshir, this is pasuk. What does he do? He was able to do, he took concise information, and he would, let's say there's a big tshuva, he'd say the Chassam Sofer paskins like this because of this Gemara, and he would give you a tamtzis in 2 lines. And that 2 lines is meirik helpful. I mean to say, there's an art in Kitzur Sfarim certain Kitzer Svarim, what they end up doing is they just like say Aser Mutter, and they can have you a long list of Chashuva people, but you don't know what the reasons behind said Gedolim are. The Piskei Tshuva is it's a kunz. It's not pages and pages, but he has an ability to take a Tshuva the Noda B'Yehuda and say, "Oh, there's the Gemara over here," and cut and paste it into 2 lines and give you a tamtzis. So now I don't have the Noda B'Yehuda. I'm a Litvisher Rav that has 10 svarim. What do? I open up my Piskei Tshuva, I check it out, and there I have the Noda B'Yehuda. And so says Rav Zevin, this is the difference between the Piskei Tshuva versus the Darkei Tshuva. Darkei Tshuva is much more in collecting a massive amount of material. I actually spoke a little bit in a different episode, in a different podcast of mine, about the Darkei Tshuva's library and the Minchas Elazar library, but they had a massive, incredible library. But the point over here is, the Piskei Tshuva, sometimes less is better. I mean, to say he didn't have those thousands of Svarim as Darkei Tshuva, he had a few hundred, which is also ganz fine, which is similar to what Rabbi Ephraim Zalman was working with in his Shari Tshuva. Now, now, in this doctorate, this fellow brings down the approach of different gedolim about using the Piskei Tshuva. One interesting thing that he does not bring down, the great gadol, the Doiv Mesharim, or Doiv Berish Weinfeld, one of the great gedolei Adar after World War II in Eretz Yisrael. So he says, when he's talking about the Piskei Tshuva, he says as follows: that from all the Likut Seforim that are out there, Piskei Tshuva b'Yardea ain't kamaisai. What does he say? This nekuda shehitik as atshuvas betzura tamtzis v'kailas b'yaiser. He mamish knew how to do it. Shekitzer v'hitik b'oifen shalayinich makam l'tais b'dvarav. He was very careful how he was doing it, and he brought down the nekudas that are negei halacha l'maisa, and very, very useful when one learns halacha l'maisa. This is what the Chabiner Rav said in regard to the Piskei Tshuva. Anyone else talk about the Piskei Tshuva? Yes, obviously many other people, but we're just going to keep it very short over here. The Chazon Ish. Let me see if I can find the paper that I printed out. As usual, always gets lost over here. And yes, it did. Wow. Oh, here it is. Okay, so the Chazon Ish. What's the Chazon Ish Shita about the Sefer Piskei Tshuvas? So Reb Chaim Kanievsky says, he was once talking to the Chazon Ish about it, and he says, Amar Rabbeinu shaPiskei Tshuva hu haPaisik Achron shal Shulchan Aruch. And then he says, this is what he told Reb Chaim Kanievsky. HaPiskei Tshuva mevi miSefer Achronim ein ze shehitik stam. He doesn't just cut and paste. El bir kol davar. And he basically, the rayas and the lashonis that he brings down, that's enough to paskin, and very, very important. So basically, what he's saying is that the Piskei Tshuva, the Likut Sefer / Piskei Tshuva, is in the world of a Likut Seforim out there extremely, extremely chashuv. So much so, he says, "You place Aaron Shalosh Shulchan Aruch." Chazon Ish doesn't say that lightly. Okay, so here we see already some later the Piskei Tshuva, what in the Beis Medrash, so to speak, of the Chazon Ish, how important such a type of Likut Sefer is for them. Okay, so now to conclude with this nakuda, and then we'll just have one last nakuda over here. It's like this. So far, what I basically tried to lead up to in a very bekitzer manner. Yes, it's not like me, but yes, once in a while we have to have Rachmanus on the audience, and that is that Kitzer Svarim throughout the ages. There were some very important key Kitzer Svarim that or likutim svarim, not likutim just to bring down the psaka mutar aser, likut svarim that knew how to bring down the tamtzis, which is found in such a the Knesset Gdoila a lot of times, in the Shari Tshuva, and in the Piskei Tshuva. And these three svarim, they're really going after the Beis Yosef. The Beis Yosef does it on a much greater level, obviously, because he's not only doing Tshuva svarim, he's also doing Rishainim and Gainim, whatever he had, Rambams, whatever. Okay, but anyway, the point is, Sefer Likutim were very important, and when you get by the time to not our generation, but after World War II, Lamashal the Chabiner Rav and the Chazon Ish are both crazy into the Piskei Tshuva, and that is what I'm trying to say with Reb Chaim Kanievsky also, a Likut Sefer of a major proportion of copying the Mishnah Berurah, which is his dugma, so to speak, was very important for him when he was creating his Likut Sefer. But he was doing something else. He wasn't just a Likut Sefer of collecting tshuvas and saying the tamtzah is similar to the Piskei Tshuva. He was going like the Mishnah Berurah, which the Mishnah Berurah created a second parish, which was the Bir Halacha, where he's mafalpul in the sugyas, going amkas into the Rishainim, whereas the Mishnah Berurah, he spoke out. The Mishnah Berurah did not want to just bring down every single Mar Makam that he had. What did he do? He brought down a lot of the Torah he had, but not all. As he told his son, not everything needs to be printed. By Reb Chaim Kanievsky, every single sugi in the Rambam is done from beginning, from Aleph Bez and Taf, going through the Rishonim, the Gainim, if relatives, the Yerushalmis, the Bavlis, and Zram. It could be Reb Chaim Kanievsky felt, and Archaim, there's other materials. So that's why the Chafetz Chaim didn't put in everything. He doesn't need to put in every single klech of his. Whereas in Zraim, the amount of new information that was just discovered, it's Kedai, and that's why Reb Chaim Kanievsky published it. Okay, now, to one last prat, and this will conclude with today, is as follows. Publishing all this, as I said, and this is what comes out, part of what's going on, is it requires a tremendous chipus of Seforim to look through research, to look through, have a massive collection, so to speak, and different Gedolim tried to make it easier for Klal Yisrael. The Beis Yosef, that was his goal, the Knesset Gedolah was his goal, and all these, and the Rebbe Ephraim Zalman spells it out also, who has kayak to go be search from all different Seforim. So now the question is searching a chelik, and this is what I would like to conclude with, is chipus Seforim, searching in Seforim, a chelik of Yegia in Seforim? Is this even a chelik in Torah? I mean, say I have opportunity, I could just rely on a Piskei Tshuva, I could have my Knesset Gedolah, I'll sit at my table, I'll have my Gemara, I'll have maybe my Kavitz Mefarshim, I'll have my Knesset Gedolah, my Shari Tshuva, my Mishnah Berurah, and that's it. Shalom Al Yisrael. Do I have to? Is there any Inyan to look further in the newer, whatever Seforim of the day, Likut Seforim of the day? Is there even any Inyan behind doing it? But before we even get to that, is it a chelik of Yigiyah B'Torah to go research? Let's say I want to go see if there's more materials than the Knesset Gedolah, Shari Tshuva, and all these people. Okay, that's the question. So just to mention briefly, Azoi, there's a Likut Yosher. We've quoted it and discussed it in the past. This is a Talmud writing down about the Trumas Hadeshen, interesting things. So he has a piece in Yeridea, and this was actually brought up, I believe, a bunch of years ago. There was a whole discussion about using article Gemara, if it's good for the Jews or bad for the Jews, because it takes away some level of Yigiyah. It's spoon-feeding it for you, so to speak. So the same thing, some might say, if the Shari Tshuva or the Piskei Tshuva, they're spoon feeding to you all these Tshuva Seforim. Maybe I should go do the research myself. It's a chesaron in my Yigiyah Satire. But Kitzer, in this piece quoted in the Likut Yosher, basically there were boys at that period of time. They used to have these rich boys. They had a table, and they didn't have to get up. They would move around the Seforim to bring for them. So let's say they needed a sefer, they just had to they had like some type of rotation on the table, and they didn't need to go get up, so to speak, wherever the Gemara was. The table would spin around, and they would have the Gemara on the other side, as opposed to other people which had to, they didn't have such a sophisticated desk, so to speak, and they had to go get up, go to the Seforim shank, so to speak, and get it. And he was sort of upset about it. So now, what in the world are we talking about? This is before the printing age. What's going on? So, without going into barichos, but basically, if one wants to see, there's a book from a book called From Henry Petrosky, The Book on the Bookshelf. So he deals with, in the Middle Ages, how did the bookshelf come into existence, and that we have today. You have a bookshelf and bookcases. It didn't just happen all of a sudden one night that there's such a thing. So in the Middle Ages, they used to have manuscripts. In the time like they had manuscripts. So there was such a thing. It was a rotating table. You needed to have room to have different manuscripts. So rich people, what they had on their table, they had an eifin that they could have a few texts open at the same time. You say, let's say someone learns a Mir Yeshiva. You have a Stender, you have a Gemara, you barely have room to learn it with another sefer. So if you're going to have to go get up and climb out from your table, your Stender, and knock down 10 people and 10 Gemaras, you're not necessarily going to go run every time you need to look up a Rishon. So this is how the Kites of Farshim was invented for people sitting in places like the Mir Yeshiva. You can't just constantly get up, even to look up a Gemara. So these rich people in the times of the Trumas Hadeshen, these rich boys, they didn't have to get up. They had a rotating table. Okay. Anyway, so some people said, I even heard once on someone said, it's a certain rich Achron in the time of the printing press, he already had a table, and that's why he didn't become famous, because he lacked this yagiyah of getting up to look for the Seforim. So we're seeing there's some type of nakuda of getting up. Okay. But say interesting, and I'm just going to say 3-4 marmakaimis about this, and this is how we'll conclude. Number one, the Eim Habanim Samecha, Yisrael Teichtel, he had a son who died young, who ended up, even though he's Hungarian, he ends up in Slobodka. Obviously, that's an interesting story in its own right. And he writes letters to his father, and he visited different people, and he describes visiting the great Reb Menachem Zemba. And Agav, he says he has on his table a Shas, Bavli, Yerushalmi, Safra, Medrash, Rambam. And when he's writing, he doesn't have to get up to the Seforim Shank to look for a Rambam. He has it all right in front of him. He's saying this Derech Agav. So you see, even though he taka had in his Seforim Shanks a crazy amount of Seforim, Nachum Zema taka had crazy amount of Seforim, but he had it easy for him. So he didn't care for this Nakuda of having to get up every time out of his seat. Okay, obviously there's a gather, right? What does it mean? Okay, now in the Eitzim Mefarshei Talmud, which is the Green Monsters in my day was called, from Mechon Yerushalayim. So they have a few of the volumes of Divrei Psicha. It's published a few times. It's the same one from Rav Hutner. And Rav Hutner brings down from the Chazon Ish, Ki bizmanenu kairin lechipus, searching for stuff, yagia. You say that's not what it's about, but they think, I did my research. I look up 10 Rambams or 10 Shuvas for him. That's called research. That's a Melez Torah. Okay. Lamaisa, just to mention, I'm going to say, okay, the Marmakam is like this. There's one time I was talking to this very chashav Yid, I've quoted him in the past, Rabbi Yaskel Tzeinvart, and it came up something he said. He asked me if I saw a certain thing. It was in the back of Shas Vilna. In the back of Shas Vilna, there's all these different achrayim. So he said, you saw that Rabbi Eliezer Moshe Horowitz, what he says, and then this in the Sugya, he says, when I found it, before there was what's called the Hagais V'Chedushim. What was he referring to? Very simple. Today, most people don't even know that when you buy most shasses, the shas has the achrayim down in the back. They're all masudar neatly. So you just turn to the back after you learn the marsha. You want to see if the Rashash or all these achrayim talk about something. So someone put them all up the Seder Adaf. But it used to be when I was younger. I'm not that old, but it used to be, and the Shas Vilna had this. You would have to turn. It was hit or miss. You wanted to know if Rabbi Yaakov Emden said something, you had to turn for the 2 pages of Rabbi Yaakov Emden. Sometimes you would miss it. And there was Rabbi Eliezer Moshe Horowitz's Haras and the different Gedolim's Haras. So someone came up with an Einfal and put the 30 achrayim that are in the back, all the little pieces, up the Seder Daf, saving a lot of time. Okay. So Rabbi Yasser was just telling me, I found it already, like someone tells you, which I say to people, you found it with Yitzhak Chachma search. I found it by looking at the book. Okay, fine. Interestingly enough, Reb Issa Zalman Meltzer, there was it seems there was different versions of the story, but in short, the story goes like this, that we have the Shas Vilna. So Shas Vilna did a bunch of things, and one of the things was they put all these achrayim in the back. So they said, whoever comes up with a mistake on Shas Vilna is going to get up as a prize. They said such a thing. So, because they were trying to encourage people to find mistakes, to fix up the additions. So it seems Rabbi Zal Meltzer had a taina. He said that the fact that you make me having to turn so many pages to find all the achrayim 20 different times, and you should have come up with a hagais v'chedushim type of thing, that was a thing that should have been fixed. That's what Rabbi Zal Meltzer held on Shas Vilna. Lamaisa in our day, it was fixed. If you have most of your Shasas, Oiz Vahada already, I'm not sure who did it first. Vakshal did it first, or Talman did it, and then Oiz Vahada did it. But today, you don't have this thing. So someone might say, what do you mean, Yagia? You have to look. Chipos Svarim. So, there's obviously some type of nakuda in the Yigiyah Svar. Now, Rabban Kotler, they quote the famous Rabban Kotler based on the Gemara Menachos and Mishnah Rabban, a Gvaldik piece, where there is a certain aspect that when something comes b'Torah's Torah, then it has an effect on the Yigiyah. That you remember, sometimes if you had to spend, like someone tells you a Moirdik Amar Makam that you had to actually schlep to go find it, sometimes it has an effect on you and you remember it for a much longer time than if you would have just been spoon-fed it. But that doesn't necessarily, but obviously I'm not coming over here to try to give the Gedarim this Nakuda, but relating to Reb Chaim Kanievsky, we'll just say like this. Reb Chaim Kanievsky was very thankful for the Rambam Frankel. Why? Because he said, it saved me a lot of research. I didn't have to research so many times Svarim, because I always wanted to know if Achrayim asked a certain question. I would open up my Frankel Rambam, and there it was. So we see, even for Chaim Kanievsky, there's this nakuda. It's good enough to know. Someone asked him about the Mechlalim Amarim and Pizgamim that we've said in the past. People say, there's a whole story to Chaim Kanievsky we mentioned, and a different thing about it, that this is what they used to test them at on Friday nights, because they had no candle, they had no electricity. In Bnei Brak, his kids would test them on Mechlalim Amarim Pizgamim, which is they would ask him all these different chazals where they are. So someone asked him, is a good sefer? It creates atzlus. Says Chaim Kanievsky, chas v'shalom, who can remember everything? It helps chipos, it saves you time. So even Chaim Kanievsky, a person who definitely understood these things, he held, there are certain benefits for it. On the other hand, when one one learns halacha l'maisa, you have to be very careful. And this we're going to discuss in Mirz Hashem in the next episode. Is you have to be very careful what it is that you're relying on. You have to know who the mechaber of the said Likut is. The Beis Yosef, we know. The Knesset Agdayla, we know. We know the Shari Tshuva. We know the Pischei Tshuva. So we know these were giants. We have the Chazon Ish and the Shabina Rav, what they're saying about the Pischei Tshuva. So it's a whole different story. But now, today, there are Likut Seforim come out every week, dozens on topics and everything, and you have to know. It could be there are Chashav Likut Seforim and that. Okay, but we'll fine tune it in the midst of the next episode, and we'll be able to get closer to concluding with understanding more in what's going on in the Derech Emunah of Reb Chaim Kanievsky, in the world of Likut Seforim, and then to just close with understanding more about the Chazon Ish. I come for today. We're trying to keep it a little shorter than some of the other episodes.
Okay, wonderful. Wow. Amazing background on Likut Seforim. Should a person get up to Harav and get to Seforim? Very important question, very important topic. Especially today with computers, right? Everything's online. Do you even have to?
Obviously, I'm talking for people. I sit in a room that has Seforim still. Many people, they just sit, they press a button, and they have between. I'm saying every person knows. Yeah, I did a Safari search. I got this, and it's a Chachma search this, and a Hebrew book search this, and a Bar Ilan, and then like they don't even know what a book looks like anymore, and that's very disturbing to me. But that's not for now. But yes, we're.
Would you like to pull out something called a book or a sefer and show?
Yeah, yes. So let's talk about a book. Okay, and this book is like this. I meant to talk about it already in the past, but basically, there's a Yid which we hope to bring on to this series of episodes we mentioned. We're going to bring him on. We quoted him already a bunch of times. His name is Rabbi Uri Tiger. If one wants to go get, there's even an article interview with him in the one of the newspapers this week. Had maybe the Inyan, I think it is, has a whole interview with him. A very nice interview about his relationship with Reb Chaim Kanievsky. So who's this Rabbi Uri Tiger? After Reb Chaim Kanievsky, already when Reb Chaim Kanievsky was alive, but more when he was nifter, tons of videos appeared on the internet of him talking with Reb Chaim Kanievsky about different things. He was zeicha to have a 20-year relationship with him as his proofreader. He read the Seforim of Reb Chaim Kanievsky very carefully. He had tons of aris, and he developed extremely close relationship with Reb Chaim Kanievsky. And one could see something like 70 videos are out there, short clips, very beautiful clips of Reb Chaim Kanievsky in a whole different light. Anyway, he's a mechaber Seforim, a tremendous Talmud Chacham. He's come to America in recent past few years, a few times. Anyway, one of his most recent Seforim in the summertime, I believe it was, he made a bar mitzvah. Whenever he makes a simcha, he tries to put out a sefer. It's called Psach Libi. What's Psach Libi? So it basically is the Rambam is famous that when he's Messiah a Sefer, he has a Musar Vart. And so Rambam has Nyar Chazaka a few times, right? X amount of volumes. So he sometimes has like a not your typical Rambam. So let's say if we're going to talk about, we just finished Chanukah, and this is the end of Zmanim. Haya lefanim ner beisai v'ner Chanukah, ay ner beisai v'kiddush hayoyin, ner beisai kaidim. Why? Mishum shalom beisai. Then he says the Rambam Sharei Hashem hanimcha klasa shalom ben ish leishtoi gadol hashalom shekol tar nitna v'chulu shenemar. Then he says darchei darchei v'chol nisir shalom. So it's like a Musar Dekavar. The Rambam has throughout Yad Chazaka a few such places. So what this Yid decided to do is each one of these things he mamash has pages on each one of the Rambams. What's the chiddush in the Rambam? What's the Rambam doing? We say like the Rambam is sort of like at the end of his Chibur, each time he gave up a Musar Vart, so he goes ba'amkos with the Rishayim Achrayim b'mayr dekavakis in a Mishnah Brura type style, which he got from his Rebbe Reb Chaim Kanievsky, which is one side a Bir Halacha type sefer, on the other side a kitzer of a Likut of what we're talking about type of thing. In the bottom he has a Shari Tzion, and he's done this already with multiple Seforim. He's done Rambam Hilchos Tshuva like this. He's done a thing that I've quoted numerous times called Darka Shel Torah. And he has a few others. And this is a beautiful sefer that just came out. It's available for purchase in America. It's 170 pages where he goes through all these Rambams with tons of information. And it's a very enjoyable sefer to go through, and highly recommend it. And Mirz Hashem, we hope to have Rabbi Uri Tiger on one of the episodes in the near future with us to discuss about Reb Chaim Kanievsky, who is devoted he knew him very well, and we've spent a lot of time discussing him.
Looking forward to having Rabbi Uri Tiger on. I actually had the schus to meet him more than once. Mamish a tzaddik of a year, a masmid, is such a fine person, and he has a fascinating backstory, which he's told.
Right, so some of it is some of it's even in this article in the Iyun, whatever it's called, that newspaper.
Very good. Okay. Thank you very much. Looking forward to the next episode.